now that the back's done and completely gutted, we'll actually go back there right there because it actually looks pretty cool. Full out hover Jeep. Axle's gone, everything is unhooked. Still need to drop the fuel tank. We have a bit of a fuel leak going on, so got to address that, but back is empty, it's done. We'll get back to that once we got some fresh parts to get back there and get it all put back in. But there's our rear axle. We're gonna send this out, get it sandblasted, get it all cleaned up. Once it's all cleaned up, we're gonna swap out the 410s that are in it for some 456s. And we're actually trying to get a new front axle right now, but if we don't, we'll rebuild this one. For now, let's take this one out. Well, there's a little glimpse into the front end of this thing. Again, it's not anything spectacular. It's pretty dirty, rusty, beat up. Needs some ball joints. You can feel there's some play going on there. So we're gonna do one of two things. Right now, there's an axle locally for sale that I'm trying to grab. If I can get it, will be perfect because it's already got 456s in it. It's a high pinion Dana 30, and it's already got an ARB air locker in it. If not, we're gonna rebuild this one, and I've got an ARB air locker sitting over there on that shelf. So, either way, it's gonna have 456s, an ARB air locker, hopefully some upgraded axle shafts, and a truss to go along with it to really strengthen this axle up. We're also gonna be replacing the steering, the track bar, and getting these arms cleaned up because those are some very high quality arms from a company called Ironman 4x4 Fab. So let's get this taken apart. That just plays into the mind that you always want to take a good measurement for your shocks and figure out what you need, because this is not what we need at all. Actually, can I borrow that for a moment? Yeah. So, I'm gonna show you guys something pretty cool underneath here. That's what happens on this exhaust when you don't take proper measurements and you have a shop that doesn't know what they're doing and put exhaust on. So that exhaust is smashed in, beat up, not what we want at all. So that's going to be getting pulled off and replaced. All of this is getting pulled off and replaced right here. So quite a bit of work to do, a lot of parts to replace. We've got a lot to get rid of. This shock is at its maximum amount of droop, and we are not even close to maximizing flex. So, and that shock is shot. That's probably why. So, if you look up here, this is all wet from shock fluid. So somebody's probably been using that shock as a limiting strap when they're out flexing and off-roading, unknowingly not knowing that their flex is limited by this shock. So we'll get a proper set of shocks in here. These look to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 inches of travel. We'll look for some 12s or something like that. That'll give us approximately what we need, but you got to take into account how big this body is with how much shaft you're going to get. And then, you know, if we go to an external reservoir, we can lessen the amount of body we have and increase the amount of travel we have just by simply removing part of that body and moving it to an external reservoir. So that'll help a lot in terms of adding more shock travel in the same space. So let's pull her apart. actually affecting our flex as well. It's completely maxed out here, so it's not allowing any more flex. One of the many reasons that track bar is going away. The other is double shear track bars. And double shear is basically what's down here. It's when you have a bushing and you have 2 points on the sides of it to put a bolt straight through. So you've got a bolt going through the front of the material and a bolt going through the back. And the way the track bar works is it aligns the axle side to side. So when the track bar tries to droop and you have it on a heim joint without any misalignment spacers that allow it to really kind of do what it's supposed to do, you lose a lot of flex. Well, if you go to a joint like what Ironman 4x4 fab offers, you have a bushing style or Curry Johnny joint style on both ends. Well, what that does is it allows it to flex and droop all that it wants. There is nothing like this to limit flex. No, but it's not going back in. Shouldn't be there anyway. Somebody was using a track bar drop bracket on that. Those are not advisable. Okay, so that right there is done. Now we'll go underneath and disconnect the long arms. Well, do some shocks as well. See if I can get the shocks from the top. The shocks should just be one bolt. Then I can take them all out as one package. Yep. So we're going after this bolt right here. And this just holds our top hat on the shock. So once we have that off, the shocks will just come right out. Just leave that there for now. That looks like a 19-ish. See the other beauty of those foam mats? You leave all your tools on them, your tools just slide. There we go. So now that shock is loose. I'm just gonna break the other side loose and take some long arms off. Disconnect a couple of brake lines while we're at it. Shop dog's chilling outside.
Oh, another light.
So I didn't go with the whatchamacallit, fluorescence. This side is just miserable to get to. I'll have to put a wrench on that side.
This segment is brought to you by Hoonigan on the wall.
Some friends. Great folks. Love them all. Who knows, if they watch carefully enough, they might have seen me on there. kick me that crescent on the ground there, that red one? Yeah, just throw it. That other top hat's super difficult to get to. It's buried underneath the brake reservoir and the slave cylinder for the clutch. Rear shocks are so much easier to take off. Problem here is this is buried underneath the brake master cylinder, so there's not a whole lot you can do to get a tool or anything underneath there. The only thing that made this remotely easy for me was that ratchet wrench that swivels. So got that loose. So now we can go and do some long arms, some brake lines, and the front axle's ready to come out. This thing, and hope the Jeep doesn't come down on me. Pretty confident in our jack stand placement, so I don't think we'll have any issues, but it is something to keep in mind when you're pulling and prodding on these Jeeps is, wow, that's terrifying. So this nut,
here, you want the camera?
Is, I have not touched this. It's fine, it's picking me up. So, this nut is finger tight. I haven't touched anything underneath this Jeep. Look at that. But no axle, no nothing. Time to clean it all up and rebuild. Yeah, I just touched it and I'm like, oh my God. Love that little trick. Let's check side number 2. It's actually tight. So that's always a nice thing. All right, those are undone. So now we can undo our brake lines and she's ready to come out. So let's get that done. Another thing to make sure you do is disconnect some connectors before you start pulling stuff out of here. Because the only thing you're going to do is test the tensile strength of whatever you forgot to unhook. I've done that before. It's quite entertaining. It's really fun when you pull a motor and you forget something in the very back and you just hear a ping. So I think that we'll just do this the easiest way possible and disconnect this brake line. So now, all we have is this ABS line, which we can actually eliminate because the ABS in this vehicle doesn't work. It's been disconnected since the 8.8 was swapped in, and for those that don't know what an 8.8 is, I know I just kind of assumed everyone knew. That's a Ford 8.8 out of a mid-90s Ford Explorer. So, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because I'm sure I might be. 31 spline, same axle lug nut pattern, so you're 5 on 4.5 again. And it's only 3/4 of an inch narrower per side, which is why you see the axle spacers back there to kind of correct our track width. But once you get like a truss or a bracket kit from a company, let's just say like R-Tech here locally, to me, I think they make the best truss system in the game for that. It's relatively plug and play. You know, you can bolt it right in if you know how to weld, or you got a buddy that knows how to weld. It just makes axle swaps super easy. And these Jeeps come with 2 axles from the factory. A Dana 35, which is absolute garbage. Don't buy it, throw it in the trash, don't waste any money on it. They break. I actually might even see if we can put a photo in there of one that I broke on 33s without a locker, on just a slight bump. You know, we were off-road and went to kind of go forward and fell back down, and it just exploded. Broken axle shaft in the spider gears and all sorts of stuff. So the 8.8 is a much stronger option. And if you want just a bolt-in option, the Dana 44A, it is an aluminum center section, but they also used them in the Dodge Vipers, so they are very strong. You can use those as well, and those came in the 96 to 98 V8s. So there's plenty of good axle options out there. In terms of front axles, the only options for bolt-in that you're gonna have is a high pinion 30, the stock low pinion 30, or a TJ Rubicon Dana 44, but that is low pinion, so you kind of have to do a little trade-off there. If it's me, I'm gonna put a high pinion 30 in it because Rubicons generally demand a pretty high price, and I don't think it's worth it. So high pinion 30 all the way for us. If you're gonna go anything more than that, 1 tons, you know, 05 plus Super Duty axles and really get after it. But this will be more than enough for what we're planning on for this rig. So let's get that other brake line out and go from there. So there's our brake lines. Now I just got to go grab what I believe is an 8mm and disconnect those ABS lines. And the other thing with brake fluid, don't touch the paint. Brake fluid eats paint. And you take your nasty brake fluid covered hands and touch paint, and you don't get it off there quick enough, you're gonna have some pretty serious blemishes. So the shocks actually had quite a bit more travel in them than I thought they did. Our main issue was that this track bar, you can see, is fully maxed out. So our new track bar system, instead of having a joint horizontal, it'll be vertical like this and in line. So when the axle droops, it'll actually be able to continue going out without being limited by that. So we'll take some cool photos and videos once that stuff gets here. I'll probably get that ordered this week. All right, we are out. I just gotta get that out. Nope. Let's give it a try. So, check this out, guys. Look at that. That is completely rusted. So we'll definitely be finding a new axle either way. We had somebody lined up for this one, but I don't know what we're gonna do at this point. I don't really feel comfortable selling it to somebody. So we'll have to readjust our plans and see what we can do. That's just how it goes. But with it having that much rust on it, I don't feel comfortable selling it to somebody and having them having an issue. So we'll look into that and see what we can't change. So maybe just a truss system. A truss system would eliminate all of that. So we'll look into it and see what we can't change and what we can find. A couple $100, I can get a full truss for this from Artec. It eliminates all of the factory stuff and gives us a super strong base to go to. So that's another option I'm going to look into.
At least the coils look fine.
Oh yeah, the parts are fine. It's just this axle is seeing a little bit of abuse. You can see it right in here. This inner axle seal is just toasted. All that diff fluid leaking out. So this will find a new home. Not a big deal. Well, this thing's ready to come out. We're gonna bring it out here on the floor and then tear it down some more. I personally, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I like the ability to pull things out and continue disassembling them as opposed to fighting underneath a Jeep. So when I can, I'll disassemble and disconnect as much as I can underneath and then pull it out and take it the rest of the way apart. So that's why this one's coming out with the long arms attached, because it's just easier. So now I'll tear it down even more and I'm not underneath a Jeep fighting myself. All right, so this is why I pulled it out this way. It's way easier to do this out here than it is crawling underneath a Jeep. So we're gonna pull these front long arms off because you can see everything on here is pretty rusted up. We're gonna take all this apart. We're gonna send it out for some powder coat and some sandblasting. So let's see what we can do. So this long arm kit, to my knowledge, has never been messed with since it was originally installed. And look at this bushing. That is a true testament to the quality of parts that my buddy Andy over at Ironman 4x4 Fab uses. That bushing is still good as brand new. You know, both sides, not cracked, not bulging, not deformed, nothing. And then look at this stock bushing. Absolutely destroyed. So we'll be replacing those on our new axle. Probably go with a Johnny joint upper like I've got on mine. So I think we're in good shape. That's interesting. Somebody didn't put a sleeve in there. Even still, the bushing's in perfect shape. It's missing the sleeve. Alright. Well, that's as far down as I'm taking that axle. Everything that's on there right now, we're not reusing. So that will either go bye-bye, which I'm fairly certain it will. We'll look for another housing and we'll rebuild that because we're putting a full case locker in it. We're putting a different gear ratio in it. There's nothing in there we need. So we'll probably be getting rid of this in favor of something in a little better shape. And yeah, she's torn down. This was our goal for the day. The only thing I've got left to do is pull that front track bar off. So put this thing over there, take that off. Okay. Hey guys, so I appreciate everybody watching. If you can, please leave a comment, like what we're doing, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. The more people that watch it, the more we're able to do. So if you want to see this keep going and succeed and allow us to kind of reinvest back in it, please subscribe. So we'll see you guys next week.